Hi everyone and welcome to Healthy Minded. Today we're going to be talking about dietary issues. George, do you think people get confused about the sort of information about what to eat and what not to eat?
Yes, because every time I see studies that show, oh, well, it's this or it's that, and no, this is bad food, that's bad, what tends to happen to me is I now have an excuse to just indulge because apparently no one really knows. But I can't lie to myself. My body shows me when I have too many hot chips and too much food, I put on weight. And so,
And look, people are different and what works for one person doesn't absolutely work for another. 2 points. Number one, they did some work a few years ago and some researchers plucked out 50 random ingredients from cookbooks and did medical searches to see about the associations between these 50 random ingredients and cancer, and found that in 43 there was an equal number of studies showing that it contributed to or helped against cancer. So basically absolutely polar opposites in 43 out of 50 of these random ingredients. So whenever you see something that says a food causes cancer, you can pretty much dismiss it. The other thing that confuses people is fats versus sugars. Now, for 40 years, people have been told that fats in the diet are bad. It's being revisited, and the problem that we have is that the original work by a fellow by the name of Ansel Keys in the 50s and 60s was actually quite flawed. He did some data and then left out the data that didn't support his hypothesis. So it's just a little bit on the dodgy side. But, history records that idea took hold. Some reviewers looked at the dietary guidelines from the 70s and 80s where people were advised to go on low-fat diets and essentially concluded that there was no, and I really want to underline this, there was no basis or evidence to support those recommendations. And what we've seen with people being on low-fat diets, which generally where you take out fat from a food, you replace it with sugar, we're seeing an increase in obesity and type 2 diabetes, and this is, in my opinion, directly correlated with low-fat diets. A researcher in the United States, an author of The Big Fat Surprise, Nina Teakholz, has actually shown that Americans, and you can probably read Australians and other people as well, actually followed the dietary advice. They reduced their intake of meat, they reduced their intake of full-fat dairy, they increased their intake of low-fat foods, they increased their intake of vegetable oils versus butter. And having done all, you hear these public health people say, oh, people don't do what they're told. Yeah, they did do what they were advised, but the advice was wrong. So now we're going to have to backtrack, and we're already starting to see that people are moving back to full-fat products. They're getting rid of the low-fat foods. They're cutting down the carbs on the diet. There's a lot of pushback from public health and from certain organisations that are, very wedded to this sort of notion of low-fat and having high amounts of grains in the diet. But history has moved past them. So there is confusion out there. Really, the key message, in my opinion, is to pretty much find out what works for you, but the overarching principles is try and eat essentially like your ancestors ate. So they didn't eat food that came from boxes, they ate foods that pretty much grew in the ground, or until maybe not that long ago were moving around, swimming or flying somewhere. So it's basically saying foods that don't come in boxes, that don't have labels on them, that if you don't eat it or freeze it, it's going to go off fairly quickly. If you can follow that as a basic principle, you're not going to go too far wrong, and your main sort of beverage of choice is water.
Good advice. We hope you enjoyed the video, and if you like Healthy Minded, please subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Yeah, and share with your friends. Please put comments below whether you agree, disagree, if you've got topics you'd like for the future. And until next time, stay healthy minded.